The war was over. The dead were gone. King's Landing had burned, and Gendry's had fallen. Jon Snow stood among the ashes, haunted by what he had done. He had killed his queen, the woman he once loved, to save the realm. Now he was a broken man. The South no longer felt like home. So he turned his eyes back to the north, back to where it all began. Winterfell stood strong, though it had suffered much. Arya Stark had returned for a short while, just to say goodbye before setting off to the west of Westeros. But something kept her from leaving, a feeling, a pull. Maybe it was the North calling her. Maybe it was unfinished business. Gendry Baratheon, newly named Lord of Storm's End, had come north to pay his respects to the Starks who helped win the war. But truth be told, he wasn't there just for respect. He came looking for Arya. She had refused him before, but he couldn't stop thinking about her. Storm's End felt empty without her. When the three of them met again, Jon, Arya, and Gendry, it was not with celebration. It was quiet, tense. So much had happened. So much had been lost. But there was a strange peace in being among the few who understood pain the same way. They sat together by the fire in Winterfell's hall. No lords, no crowns, just old friends who had seen too much war. Jon had no desire to rule, and Arya had no interest in settling down. But Gendry, he was different. He had land now, a name, power. Yet he was tired of the game. "What if," Arya said softly, "we stopped playing their game altogether?" Jon looked at her. "What do you mean?" "I mean, forget the South. Let them fight for thrones and titles. We build something new here, in the North. Our own team. Our own way." Gendry leaned forward. "What would that even look like?" "Free people," Arya said, "not bound by houses or old names. Fighters, builders, survivors. The kind of people who remember what really matters." Jon thought of the wildlings, the Northmen, even the broken pieces of old houses. There were many still loyal to him, despite his name. People who believed in him, not because he was a Targaryen or a Stark, but because he had bled beside them. It wasn't just an idea anymore. It was a plan. The next morning, they rode out together. Not to conquer, not to rule, but to gather. They went to the villages near the wall, where winter had left many hungry. They traveled to the ruins of Last Hearth and Carhold, helping people rebuild, offering safety, food, hope. Jon spoke to them not like a king, but like one of them. Arya showed young girls how to fight, how to survive. Gendry brought tools, steel, and hands willing to help forge a future. Slowly, they started to change the North. But not everyone was happy. The lords who had waited for Jon to take the crown grew restless. They didn't understand what he was doing or why he refused to rule. Whispers began that he was forming his own army, that Arya was turning wild, that Gendry had betrayed his southern ties. Letters were sent. Spies were planted. Trouble was coming. Still, the three didn't stop. Together, they were stronger. Arya was the shadow in the dark, Gendry the hammer in the light, and Jon the calm before the storm. They were not a kingdom. They were not rebels. They were something else. A new North was being born, but birth always came with blood. Snow fell thick over the North, burying old paths and making new ones harder to find. But Jon, Arya, and Gendry didn't stop. They traveled village by village, gathering people, broken men, orphaned children, women widowed by war, even wildlings who had come back from beyond the wall. They didn't promise gold or glory. They promised something else, a chance, a life where no one bowed to a name they feared, where loyalty was earned, not forced. Word spread like wildfire in winter. People started calling them the Three Walls. But the South heard it too. Sansa Stark, now queen in the North, sat on her wooden throne in Winterfell. She listened as her council spoke in hushed tones about her brother, and his strange team. She had trusted Jon once, but now even she wondered, was he trying to take her crown? "He's gathering swords," Mr. Wendell said. "And not just peasants. Good fighters, survivors. And what would he do with them?" Sansa asked coldly. "March on Winterfell?" No one answered. She didn't want war with Jon. He was family. But she had ruled the North with careful steps, political skill, and the memory of her suffering. If Jon's movement grew larger, it could turn the North into another battlefield. So she sent a raven. A request, a warning, maybe even a test. Come to Winterfell. Speak face to face. Jon received the message in a small forest town called Briarfall. They had just defended the place from a gang of deserters who turned into bandits. Gendry was patching up a boy with a deep cut across his back. Arya stood by the door, eyes narrow. "You think it's a trap?" Arya asked. Jon sighed. "I think it's Sansa. She's scared." "She should be," Gendry muttered. "You're out here doing more good than her whole court." But Jon knew power, knew how fear twisted it. If Sansa felt threatened, she might strike first. He couldn't let that happen, so he went. Only Jon. He rode alone to Winterfell, under the banners of no house. The gate guards were shocked to see him. No escort, no army, just Ghost padding beside him, like a silent shadow. Inside the great hall, Sansa stood waiting. She looked different, older, colder, like a queen carved from ice. "You didn't have to come alone," she said. "I wanted you to know I'm not your enemy," Jon replied. "And yet you gather followers, start building outside my rule. What am I supposed to think?" Jon looked her straight in the eyes. "That I'm not here for crowns. I've worn one. I gave it up. What I'm building, it's for those who've been forgotten." Sansa's jaw tightened. "And what am I supposed to do with that? Support it? Or stay out of the way?" They stared at each other for a long time. And then something strange happened. Sansa stepped back. Not out of fear, but thought. She didn't trust easily anymore, but she saw something in Jon's eyes. Purpose. Pain. Truth. "I won't stop you," she finally said. "But I won't help you either. You're on your own." Jon nodded. That was all he needed. He returned to the camp, only to find Arya gone. Gendry looked grim. She got a message. Some girl she trained with in Braavos, killed by a faceless man. Arya thinks someone's hunting the old students. Jon's heart sank. Arya had her own ghosts to chase. She had left a note. "Don't follow me. This one's mine." Jon looked at Gendry. "Then it's just us now," Gendry grinned. "I was hoping you'd say that." But they didn't realize, while they dealt with Sansa and Arya's past, a bigger threat was coming. One they couldn't see. In the shadows beyond the Dreadfort, an old name whispered back to life. House Bolton was not dead after all. The North remembered. It remembered screams echoing from the Dreadfort's walls, flayed corpses swinging in the cold wind, and Ramsay Bolton's twisted smile as he hunted men for sport. So when rumors spread that someone had returned to the ruins of that cursed castle, no one believed it at first. The Boltons were supposed to be gone, extinct like a sickness finally cured. But evil doesn't die. It hides, and it waits. Jon and Gendry were in the village of Hollowstead, teaching young men how to fight, when a rider came in at full gallop, nearly frozen, blood on his lips. "They're back," he gasped. "The flayed men?" "They're back at the Dreadfort." Jon stood frozen. Gendry dropped the sword he was sharpening. "Bolton?" Jon asked. "No name," the rider said. "Just masks. But they flay people alive, hang them by the road." Said the North forgot who ruled by fear. Jon's breath turned to mist. "We ride tonight." He and Gendry gathered their best fighters. A rough but loyal band. Not soldiers, but survivors. The ones who had nothing left to fear. They moved fast through the snow-covered forests, cold biting at their faces, silence hanging heavy in the air. The Dreadfort rose before them like a wound in the earth. It looked abandoned, quiet, but death has a way of hiding in stillness. Jon and Gendry scouted from the ridge. Smoke curled from one chimney. A banner hung torn from the gate, not the old Bolton-flayed man, but a twisted version of it, drawn in black ash and blood. "I thought Ramsay was the worst of them," Gendry muttered. Jon narrowed his eyes. This might be worse. That night they attacked. No war horns, no warning. Just shadows slipping through cracks in the stone walls. But the enemy was ready. From the towers, masked figures screamed like wild beasts. They wore leather stitched from old Bolton armor, faces covered in red-dyed cloth. And they were fast. Brutal. One of Jon's men was gutted before he even reached the gate. Inside the hall, Jon faced their leader, a tall, pale man with sunken eyes and a voice like a whisper cutting through steel. "I am no Bolton," he said, "but I carry their truth. The North must remember who makes it bleed." Jon raised Longclaw. "The North remembers its monsters and how to kill them." The fight was vicious. Gendry's hammer crushed skulls like rotting pumpkins. Jon moved like a ghost, every swing of his blade driven by rage and memory. The masked cult didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like fanatics, suicidal, savage. By dawn, the snow was red, the Dreadfort smoldering again. But they didn't win without cost. 14 of Jon's fighters were dead. One young girl, barely 16, had been flayed alive before they got to her. Gendry found her body and wept. "This isn't just some madman," Jon said afterward. "This is a message. Someone wants the North to fear again." Back in Hollowstead, the villagers welcomed them like heroes. But Jon didn't smile. He looked toward the icy winds that blew down from the east. "If one snake survived," he said, "there might be more." Meanwhile, far from the Dreadfort, Arya was in Braavos. She moved like a shadow, quieter than the wind. She had found 2 names already, former students of the Faceless Men who had tried to leave that life behind. Both dead, their faces stolen. Now she hunted the one doing it, but the killer left her a gift. One morning, she found it tied to her horse's saddle, a face, her own, and a note beneath it, "Come home, little wolf, or I'll start with Gendry." Arya's blood ran cold. She turned her horse west, back to the North, back to them. The snow in the North had turned black in places, not from soot, but from blood soaked into the frost. Word of the Dreadfort massacre spread fast. Farmers, traders, and even lords whispered of a new terror rising in the shadows. They didn't know what to call it, but they knew one thing. Only Jon Snow and Gendry were doing something about it. In Hollowstead, Jon sat in silence, staring at the fire. Ghost lay at his feet, growling low, a sound Jon hadn't heard since the long night. Something dark was coming again. Not undead, but just as cold. Gendry slammed a mug on the table. "We killed them. Earned that whole cursed place down." Jon shook his head. "It wasn't about the Dreadfort. It was about fear. They wanted us to fight back. Now they know who we are, where we are. Then let them come," Gendry said through clenched teeth. But Jon knew better. He'd led too many men into too many traps to believe the worst was over. Then a horn blew outside the village gates. A lone rider approached, wrapped in a thick cloak, the hood pulled low. Jon stepped out, hand on Longclaw. "Name yourself." The rider raised her head. Arya. Her eyes were sharper, colder, but they still searched Jon's face like she was making sure he was real. "Miss me?" she asked. Jon didn't smile, but something like peace returned to his face. He stepped forward and pulled her into a tight hug. For a moment, the war paused, but only a moment. Inside, Arya unrolled a blood-stained note and placed it on the table. Gendry froze when he saw it. That's your face," he whispered. Arya nodded. "Someone's wearing it. A faceless one. They're killing the ones who tried to leave. And they've got my scent now." Jon looked between them. "Why come back?" Arya looked straight at Gendry. "Because they threatened you." He blinked. For once, Gendry didn't have a comeback. Just a small flicker of guilt in his eyes, and something more. Jon stood. "We need to leave this village. Tonight, we've drawn too much attention." "Where?" Arya asked. "There's an old place," Jon said, "north of the gift, hidden in the forest. The first keep. It was abandoned after the long night. No sigils. No banners, just stone and snow." "Perfect," Arya said. "No faces there to steal?" That night, they led the villagers and fighters through the woods, moving fast, quiet, like wolves in the dark. They traveled for 2 days with no rest. On the third morning, they reached the first keep, a forgotten stone fortress swallowed by trees and time. It was cold, damp, and full of cobwebs. But it was safe, for now. There, they began building something new. Gendry took over the forge, using scrap metal to arm the willing. Arya trained the young ones in silence, teaching them to move unseen. Jon held councils by candlelight, not as a king, but as a war leader. No politics, no noble games. Just survival, but the danger was closing in. One night, as the wind howled outside, Jon found a message nailed to the old gate. No rider. No sound. Just words carved into the wood. "The North belongs to pain. We will skin your dreams." Jon's jaw clenched. Behind him, Arya stepped into the moonlight, blade in hand. "They want to play games with fear?" she said. Jon turned to her. "Then we remind them who taught the North how to survive fear." Inside the keep, Gendry pounded steel into war axes. A new war was beginning, not for crowns, not for power, but for the soul of the North. And this time, the wolves weren't backing down. Snowstorms swept across the forest like a beast with claws, burying the first keep in thick white silence. But inside those stone walls, it was anything but quiet. The sound of steel against steel echoed through the old halls. Children learned to fight with wooden swords. Women practiced archery beside blacksmiths. No one was idle. Jon stood on the tower, watching the tree line. He hadn't slept in 2 days. The words carved on their gate haunted him. "The North belongs to pain. We will skin your dreams." It was more than a threat. It was a promise. Below him, Gendry cursed from the forge. His hands were burned and blistered, but he didn't stop. He was crafting something special. A massive steel gate reinforced with dragonglass shards Arya had hidden years ago. "We won't be flayed in our sleep," he said. "Not while I'm still breathing." Arya, on the other hand, had gone hunting. Not deer, not food, men. She had followed a trail, stories of strange deaths, bodies left without faces, a signature only the faceless used. One night, she slipped out of the first keep alone. She left no note this time. Not because she didn't care, but because she knew what she was walking into. Jon noticed her missing by morning. "She's hunting again," he told Gendry. Gendry slammed a hammer down so hard the anvil cracked. "She thinks she has to do everything alone." "She always did," Jon said. "But not anymore." Meanwhile, Arya moved like a ghost through the snow. 2 days east, she found them. A small camp of cloaked men, huddled around a dying fire, their faces wrong, skin too smooth, expressions too still. She knew right away. Faceless. She didn't wait. By the time the last one realized she was among them, his throat was already open. She left none alive. When it was over, she knelt beside the fire, pulling off one of their masks. Beneath it, the man's real face was young, maybe 20. A boy. But his hands told the truth, scarred, cold, and soaked in old blood. No innocence. Still, her fingers shook as she threw the mask into the flames. Suddenly, she felt it. A breath behind her. A voice. You left the house of black and white, but it never left you. She spun, blade ready, but no one was there. Just wind. Back at the keep, Jon held council with a group of former wildlings and forgotten northern families. People who had no voice under Sansa's rule, no land, no future. But they were loyal to Jon, not because of birth, but because of fire. The kind you earn in battle. One of them, a scarred old woman named Wyla, spoke what everyone feared. You think this army in the shadows, this flaying cult, is just killing for sport? Jon shook his head. They're trying to send a message. And what message do we send back? She asked. Gendry stood, wiping grease from his face. We carve our own sigil. Not a crown, not a wolf. A hammer, a blade, and fire. No houses, no banners. Just fighters. Jon looked around. They call us traitors, outlaws. Good. Let them. While they bicker over thrones, we'll build something stronger than any kingdom. And that night, they lit fires all across the keep. Smoke rose into the sky, not in fear, but defiance. A symbol to anyone watching. The north had new wolves. Arya returned by dawn, blood on her cloak and something darker in her eyes. They're not done, she said. Someone's leading them. Someone wearing faces. But not just to kill. Jon narrowed his eyes. Then what? Arya looked at him and Gendry. Voice low. They're building an army. One that looks like us. That hit hard. Jon didn't speak for a long time. Then finally he said, if they want to wear our faces. Gendry finished his sentence. Then we tear off their masks. And so the first keep became something more. Not a fortress. Not a home. A war front. And war was coming. The forest around the first keep had gone dead quiet. No birds, no wolves. Even the wind moved differently, as if it knew what was coming. Jon stood at the outer wall, his breath clouding the cold air. In the distance, thin black figures moved through the trees. Not fast, not loud, just there, watching. Arya joined him without a word. Her face was pale but calm, like she'd already accepted what was about to happen. They're testing us, she said. Jon nodded. Seeing how scared we are, they'll be disappointed. Behind them, the keep had changed. Tents had turned into stone huts. Fires burned at every corner. What was once a place of refuge was now a stronghold. Fighters trained every hour. Blades sharpened, arrows counted. No banners flew. Only black cloth tied to wooden poles. A signal. We belong to no one. Gendry worked beside the gate, fitting the final piece of the steel and dragon-glass wall. Sweat froze on his brow, but he didn't stop. Not until it was done. We're ready, he told Jon. Jon didn't respond. He was staring at something in the trees. A child. Or something that looked like a child. Too still. Too perfect. Arya stepped forward. It's a mask, she whispered. They're wearing faces of the people we couldn't protect. Jon gritted his teeth. Cowards. That night, they struck first. A scouting party of 10, silent, armed, and fast. Jon led them himself, with Arya and Gendry at his sides. They moved like shadows, slipping through the woods toward the shapes in the dark. But what they found stopped them cold. A camp, larger than expected. Dozens of tents. Faceless warriors sharpening blades. Some wore masks of villagers, children, even old allies. And in the center of it all stood the one they feared. A woman. Her voice rang across the clearing like ice cracking on a lake. You abandoned your crowns, your gods, your names. So did we. She turned. Her face was Arya's. Exactly. Jon stepped forward, sword drawn. Take it off. The woman smiled. This face? She gave it to us. Long ago. Traded it for freedom. You remember that, don't you, little wolf? Arya's grip tightened on her dagger. That was before I knew who I was. And who are you now? The woman asked. Stark? Killer? Or just another girl, pretending not to be afraid? Arya moved first. She was a blur. The real Arya, faster than death. Her blade sliced through the imposter's shoulder, but not deep enough. The woman leapt back, laughing. Blood dripped down, but her smile didn't fade. Then the forest lit up. Ambush. Dozens of masked fighters poured from the trees. Jon's group fought hard, but they were outnumbered. Blage clashed, arrows flew. Gendry's hammer crushed skulls like rotten pumpkins. Arya moved like wind, but even she couldn't kill them all. Jon shouted, "Fall back to the keep." They ran, dragging wounded with them. 3 of their best fighters didn't make it. Bodies torn, faces already peeled. By the time they reached the gates, the woods behind them were burning. Jon fell to his knees, covered in blood. Gendry slammed the gate shut. That was just a taste, he said. Arya didn't speak. She stared at her own face, now worn by someone else. It had changed her. Inside the keep, chaos buzzed. The wounded screamed. The fires burned hotter. Jon stood before the people, his voice louder than it had ever been. They want to wear our skin, use our names, break our spirits. But we are the ones who faced the dead and lived. We are the ones who lost everything and still rose. He pointed to the forest. They hide behind stolen faces. We stand with our own. A silence followed. Then Gendry raised his hammer. For the real North, the cry echoed through the stone walls. Dozens joined in. The real North. Arya stood beside Jon. Let them come, she said. We'll burn every mask they wear. Far in the forest, the woman with Arya's stolen face stared into the flames. She's ready now, she whispered. Good. The real game begins soon. And behind her, someone stepped from the shadows. Taller, broader, with the cold, pale eyes of someone Jon thought long dead. Is he ready? The voice asked. The woman smiled. He will be. The storm broke at dawn. Snow and ash fell together as if the sky itself couldn't tell the difference between winter and war. At the first keep, every fighter stood at the walls, weapons in hand, eyes wide but steady. They had no sigils, no noble names, no war horns. But they were ready to die on their feet. Jon Snow stood at the gate, armor laced tight, lone-claw gleaming on his back. Beside him, Arya moved like a shadow with fire in her veins. Gendry stood on the battlements, hammer in hand, face grim. The woman with Arya's stolen face had returned, but she wasn't alone. The forest cracked open as hundreds of masked fighters emerged in silence, forming perfect lines without a single word. Some wore faces of people Jon had buried. Others wore faces Jon had killed. But it was the one behind them who stole his breath. A man, tall and cloaked in black. Jon recognized him instantly, though his skin was pale and cold, as if death had kissed it and let it live. Sir Alliser Thorne? Dead. Or so Jon thought. But this was something else. His voice was low, hollow. You should have stayed dead, Lord Snow. Jon drew Longclaw. You should have stayed buried. Alliser smiled. The Night's Watch burned. The wall fell. But death didn't forget. It gave me a second chance, and this time, I don't waste it on loyalty. Arya's voice cut in sharp. You wear another man's face now. He nodded. And soon I'll wear yours. Before another word, a horn blew from the trees behind. Everyone turned. Sansa Stark had arrived. 100 riders rode with her, bearing Stark banners. But she didn't come to save Jon. She came to end the threat. Her voice rang through the snow. You've made yourself a new kingdom, Jon. a kingdom of ghosts. I came to watch it fall. Jon's heart tightened. She had picked her side. So be it. He raised his sword high. No more masks, he called. No more thrones. No more fear. And with a roar, the battle began. The masked army surged forward like a black tide. Steel clashed against steel. Arrows rained down. Fire lit the snow. Men screamed and died. Faces were ripped off mid-battle, some real, some stolen. Arya danced through the blood, blade in each hand, cutting down those who wore the faces of her past. Gendry swung his hammer with fury, bones breaking with every strike. Jon fought like a man already dead, fearless, brutal, unstoppable. The woman with Arya's face lunged at Arya, laughing. I am you. I am what you ran from. Arya didn't hesitate. You're nothing, and slit her throat clean. As the woman fell, Arya pulled the mask from her own face and threw it into the fire. Behind them, Jon faced Sir Alliser again. Steel rang as their blades met. Alliser was faster now, colder, inhuman. But Jon had something else, purpose. They fought through fire and blood, blow after blow. Finally, Jon plunged Longclaw through Alliser's chest. Your watch ends, he whispered. The enemy began to break. One by one, the masked men fell, and behind them, Sansa's army watched in silence. And then, something unexpected happened. Sansa gave a signal. Her riders dismounted and began helping the wounded. She walked through the ashes toward Jon. I didn't come to fight you, she said. I came to see what you'd built. He looked at her, exhausted, and she looked around at the keep, at the people still standing, at the dead still burning. I see the north, she said softly. Not the old one. A new one. Jon nodded, unsure whether to thank her or turn away. But for now, there was no crown to fight over. Arya stood beside Gendry, blood across her face, but her eyes clear. It's over. Gendry looked at her. Is it? She smiled. For the first time in a long while. Yes, this time it is. Days passed. The first keep became legend, a place where no house ruled, where survivors built something stronger than bloodlines. Jon never took a throne. Gendry never returned to Storm's End. Arya never left for the west. They stayed in the north, together, the wolves who wouldn't bow, who wouldn't die, who remembered everything. And from the ashes of masks and lies, something real was born. The true north, unbroken and free.